Thank you, everybody, for joining us today, those who are here live with us and everybody watching this recording after the fact for the Democracy Group's first ever podcast fellow commencement ceremony. I am so excited to introduce you all to three of our podcast fellows who have been hard at work on their shows for the past couple of months. And they're going to tell you about them and talk with you to answer any questions you have about the work that they've been done and the work that they have done and how they might be able to work with you moving forward. Just as a way of introduction, the Democracy Group is an initiative of the McCourtney Institute for Democracy at Penn State University. The McCourtney Institute is a research center that supports research, education, and outreach on democracy and all of the things that it means to live in a democracy. And a big part of the outreach component of the Institute's mission is through the Democracy Group Podcast Network, which is a collective of about 18 different podcasts that all promote democracy, civic engagement, and civil discourse. The network started in 2020 as a way to help those shows promote each other and expand their reach within podcasting and grow their audiences. But over time, we expanded to other more network-wide projects that really made use of the expertise from all of the different hosts and producers within our network. And one of those is the Podcast Fellowship Program. The fellowship launched last spring, so earlier this year, and is very generously supported through the Bridge Alliance. And thank you to David Nevins for making that happen and providing us with the support that allowed us to send a recording package, microphones and all kinds of things to our fellows, as well as to provide them with access to some of the software and the tools that they need to produce their shows. And, we really wanted to start this fellowship because we recognize, and by we, I mean Brandon Stover, who you'll hear from in just a minute. He's our network manager. Brandon and I recognize that members of Gen Z are definitely podcast listeners. Some grew up listening to podcasts with their parents. Others found podcasts through maybe influencers that they follow. I know that's certainly the case for the students I teach here at Penn State. They often find their way into podcasting because someone that they follow on YouTube or on Instagram starts a podcast, and that is their introduction to the medium. So while Gen Z is a growing demographic among podcast listeners, they are proportionally underrepresented when it comes to podcast creators. Many podcast creators are millennials or members of Gen X. I myself am a millennial, and it kind of just because of when podcasting kind of started, maybe about 8 to 10 years ago. That was really prime time for when a lot of millennials were getting their careers going. So it just sort of worked out that way. But we need Gen Z's voice out there, especially when it comes to politics and democracy. I think a lot of the shows in our network have had conversations about generational divides in politics and the problem of gerontocracy in America, right? So we as a network saw the need to get Gen Z's voice out there and help them use podcasting as a platform to explore their own thoughts and ideas about democracy and their role within it. And so with that high level framework in mind, we really benefited from Brandon's background. He has a lot of experience in curriculum design and creating educational experiences, both synchronously and asynchronously. He's previously created a course on podcasting, on how to start a podcast that's self-paced. So we're really lucky to have Brandon's time and talent on this project. And I'm going to turn it over now to him to talk a little bit about the structure of the fellowship and also introduce you to the 3 of our 4 fellows who are joining us tonight.
Excellent. Thank you, Jenna. As Jenna mentioned, I'm Brandon Stover, the network manager for the Democracy Group. I help a lot with the back end of all of our collaboration and projects that we do at the Democracy Group between all of our podcasts, as well as all of our partners that we often work with, some of those being on the call today, like Braver Angels, the Fulcrum, the so on and so forth. So what I want to talk about today before we hand it over to the fellows to share about the amazing work that they've done is sort of the overview of what they've learned in their journey so far. It's a very passionate group of fellows. They're very insightful. I very much enjoyed our workshops that we did. They always brought great comments about the status of democracy now, what their views in politics are, but also how they can be content creators and developing content to speak to those topics. And they're all very passionate about making a difference in some way and using podcasting as a tool in order to do that. And that's really what we focused on when developing the fellowship and the curriculum for this is not only teaching the tools and tactics to be a podcaster, but actually to start developing their voice and refining their ideas so that they can communicate it to other people. During the curriculum, during the workshops, they focused a lot on how podcasting can be used to discuss these important ideas in democracy. And we brought in some of the expertise of our network, some of our hosts and the people that work for the podcast, many of them having great expertise in what's plaguing our democracy currently. And so we had some of those hosts come in, speak with our fellows about those topics, as well as develop some watch at your own pace videos on those as well. We also taught them how to develop a niche audience. So when you're starting any sort of podcast or any sort of content, it's much easier to begin by reaching a small number of people first and developing outwards. So we showed them how to do that while also developing their voice, understanding what their values are and the ideals that they want to be speaking to that audience, being able to marry those two things. We also taught them how to book guests, start preparing for guests, do research on them, get a really good understanding so that they can deliver a very powerful interview. And then we actually had them practice some interviews. We invited some experts from our network as well as some of our partners to come in. And they did practice interviews with those people, which all went really well. I think one of our fellows may even have gotten a internship out of it. So done very, very well. And then we moved to editing and publishing and being able to take this raw interview that they've created and be able to turn it into a story, something that actually transitions and carries that message to the people that are listening. And then afterwards, after having that episode that they've created, it was time to talk about how to market it and start getting it out there. And so we taught them a lot about working with other podcasters, doing cross promotions, doing different marketing tactics that we use at the Democracy Group as a network, trying to carry those skills over. And then finally ended on careers in podcasts and how they may be able to leverage what they're learning in political science or in journalism and tie that in with creating a podcast, and how they may be able to use some of the skills that they've been learning in the fellowship. So they learned all of this during weekly workshops that they all joined and did activities with one another, and then through some self-paced curriculum and working with mentors occasionally that are hosts within our networks to trying to pair them up with somebody that's already done this before and can kind of show them the ropes, if you will. So at this point, now they are ready to launch their podcast. And that's one of the reasons that we're holding this commencement is so that they can share that with you. But we can use it as a promotional vehicle for those that are watching later, use it to help on social media, all things that we had taught them during the fellowship. But more importantly, to celebrate all the wonderful work that they've done. So the way this will work is each fellow will be given about 3 to 5 minutes to give a short pitch about the show that they developed. And then afterwards, we will take questions from the audience that you can ask to the fellow about their podcast, their idea, what their views are on different topics in democracy, anything related to that. And you can either raise your hand or you can drop your question in the chat, and then I will call on you and you can unmute yourself and ask the question to the fellow. We'll have three fellows presenting today. We had four in the fellowship. One of them was not able to make it. Um, so we'll have three fellows doing their pitch, and then afterwards, Jenna will have a few closing comments to end our commencement. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to our first fellow for their pitch, which is Joey. So Joey, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi everyone. Thank you for coming to listen to our pitches for our podcast. I just want to start by saying this fellowship has really been very informative. It's been a blast. I want to thank Jenna and Brandon for inviting us to do this fellowship and helping us learn the ins and outs of podcasting through these last few months. So my name is Joey Picarillo, and I'm working on a podcast that will be titled Democracy's Dawn, Epochs and Reform. Democracy's Dawn will follow the formation of the American Republic through the epochs of American history. This podcast will focus on understanding the formation of our democracy through the political theory lens, understanding the ideas and thinkers that influenced the founders, as well as other influential framers throughout our nation's history. In today's world, where democracy's ideals and challenges are more relevant than ever, understanding our past is a key to navigating our future. The podcast will adopt a narrative approach, which will bring history to life, making complex political theories both accessible and engaging. I'll release Democracy's Dawn in seasons, each dedicated to a different era of American history. Imagine a season on the Founding Fathers, or the Jacksonian era, or the Civil Rights Movement, New Deal, and all this through a captivating blend of storytelling and analysis. What will set Democracy's Dawn apart is my commitment to depth and perspective. The podcast will not just be recounting events, but exploring the whys behind them. Through interviews with historians and political theorists, it'll offer insights that go beyond the textbook, connecting the dots between past and present. As a current student at Penn State, I have a great interest in the topics of theory and history, and I hope that this educational experience will be great, just not for myself, but for you as well, the listener. I'm always reading and learning more about these subjects, and sharing what I've learned is my absolute favorite thing to do. I hope you're as excited about listening to Democracy's Dawn as I am about creating and releasing it, and I hope my passion for political theory and storytelling shines through and helps make this project a success. I really look forward to hearing and answering your questions.
Any questions for Joey? Joey, could you talk a little bit about where the idea come from? Why this out of any idea that you could have taken forward?
Sure. So I think that I trace my interest back in political theory to I really started reading a lot about political theory during COVID when everybody was sort of inside and picking up books and learning, and or at least I was learning a lot. And I read a lot of Locke and Rousseau, and then I moved on to more contemporary theorists like Dahl and Lippard and Dewey, and it just sort of inspired me to want to tell people about it. I mean, I'm a pretty social person, so I would anybody who is interested in learning anything about politics or the reasons behind things, or particularly democracy, um, I would kind of talk their ear off. And I'm also very interested in American history, particularly uh, early Republic, the Articles of Confederation, the Madison era, all the way into like the Jacksonian era, just this evolution of this great political experiment that ended up creating the nation we're in right now. And I see somebody has a question, so I'll cut myself off there.
Nathaniel, would you like to ask a
I didn't
question?
mean to interrupt with a question.
No, it's fine. Yeah.
But what I was prepared to ask you was like, what's the format of an episode? I haven't seen what you've done so far. So is it you talking, or is it kind of bringing in quotes from other people? Is it interviews? How have you put it together?
So I envision it being a definitely a mix of both. If you've seen those, I've mentioned this a lot to Jenna and Brandon, but if you've seen those like Vox videos where they sort of go through a topic and they
An
explain it,
explainer. Yeah.
yeah, right, an explainer, um, usually through the lens of the narrator, but also incorporating different interviews and quotes from experts. So I think some episodes would definitely involve experts. Some episodes would be just myself describing uh how John Locke influenced the Constitution or the Bill of Rights, or stuff like that. Um, but it would definitely be a more it would be an explainer sort of template.
Got it.
AJ?
Sounds cool.
So, oh, so Joey, your your idea for, well, actually not idea, like your podcast sounds like something like I would watch in those long form video essays on YouTube.
Mhm.
And I'm not gonna lie, I'm really looking forward to what the first episode looks like. So let me know when it releases. I do want to ask though, who is your intended audience? You said like a Vox video, like Vox Media Insider videos, some of the GQ videos. Um, but I'm wondering like what is your audience looking for in terms of like the YouTube algorithm, Instagram Reels, TikTok? Is it aimed towards adults, kids, teenagers? Like, how's that? What's the range looking like?
So that's a good question because I've kind of thought a lot about that, like who is the exact audience for it. And I think the easy answer for that would be anybody who's interested in the American Republic and early like American history, post-revolution, pre-Civil War. I mean, that's like where I'm really going to focus the first season on. Um, and so I think any students, perhaps academics, people who are interested in um that era, people who are interested in political theory. I'm not I'm not certain it'll be the most palatable to people who are maybe teenagers, people who are not interested in politics. Obviously, I mean, this is the democracy group. So if you're interested in democracy, hopefully this is a podcast that'll be interesting to you. But outside of that, I mean, the aim is to have the reach and the overall like um I guess the reach of those Fox videos where people are approaching it something that they never thought that they would really be interested in, and hearing about it and being like, wow, this is actually much more important than I originally thought it would be. I want to hear more about this. And that's my goal.
Have you thought about focusing it on challenges to democracy in different eras, since we're in an era where we are really facing one from the Trumpists, and there are other times in our history where we've had big issues?
Yeah. Something I just realized I've sort of neglected to address in my pitch was it's epochs and reform. And ideally I would not just touch on these are the connections, but also this is how, let's say, I would address the formation of the Constitution and its lack of its anti-majoritarianism, let's say. And then I would address this is how so when I think of Madison, I think about the Federalist Papers, him talking about how he wished that the Senate wasn't so um anti-majoritarian and how it would be more representative. Well, it would be more like the House in that it would be representative of the people, sort of by not by district, but at not at large, like two per state. So when I think about the challenges that we're in today, I think a lot about how those tie to these epochs. And you think about bureaucracy sort of becoming like a spoil system, or you think about more contemporarily, um, you think about campaign finance and the sort of lack to regulate that. I definitely see the challenges of today being people people who are influenced and involved with the Trump movement and the MAGA movement. Um, and I would definitely want to involve those influences, and not just, hey, Trump is bad, but where does that start, right? Does it start with Goldwater? Does it start even before that? Does it what would be the political theory explanation for something like that? And also what would be its ties to American history? I hope that answered your question.
All right. Thank you guys for asking questions. And Joey, thank you so much for sharing that. We're going to head and move to KJ for sake of time. So I'll hand it over to you, KJ. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brandon. Hello, guys. My name is Kbid. I go by KJ Mauwong. My podcast is called the Afakasi Podcast. I know I really don't look like it right now, but I swear I'm half Samoan. And Afakasi is Samoan for half caste, or just like mixed. But it's not, I'm mixed with a very unique perspective in life. I've been a missionary since about 4 years old. I've been around the world and in a lot of parts of America. I have, in the same lifetime, lived in a mansion and lived in a car before. So it's been very weird and jarring to have both perspectives and being able to apply them to, well, every experience I've ever had after that. So my podcast in that lane follows regarding perspectives, narratives of perspectives, and we try to apply these perspectives and the heuristic narratives that we follow into a theory and a problem solving tactic for contemporary problems in America that we have today. The first episode talks about the right to privacy. So just for the bit, I made both of my guests unknown, anonymous. They are strangers. We joked about even if they were existing or not. And we use that lane to follow into feminism, the right to privacy, the 14th and 13th Amendment, Voting Rights Act, the Supreme Court, the Senate. It follows a lot of interesting avenues just because we have the intersection of three very unique perspectives, viewpoints. I'm not exactly at liberty to say who they were, but let me just say, like, one of them is an education major who is doing work regarding identity and education for minorities, and the other one is a music major who is doing a senior project on identity as well. I don't know. I'm just in Philly right now, so we are surrounded by little liberal arts schools and tech schools. So it's really not hard to just walk down a hallway, ask a professor if they got 5 minutes, and just interview them. I got so much content backlogged. I don't even know like what I'm going to do with all of it. Kind of need an editor. But each podcast kind of follows something similar to Joey, but it involved a question that I asked. Who's going to tell it to the teenagers? Who's going to tell it to kids? And who can explain it to a 3-year-old? I'm not going to lie. I'm not exactly doing well with speaking in Google Gaga terms yet. So I'll come back to you guys when I do. But until then, every concept that we bring back, we bring up in the podcast episode, we break it down. We break down the history as much as we can. And we break down the politics, some theory, not all of it. I am in theory classes right now, and it's kind of difficult to explain without more or less reading the text verbatim and breaking it line by line. So we try to get the main ideas down, at least in that context. We do bring up Locke, we do bring up Rousseau, but Those are like regarding the Second Amendment and just context of like fear of the government, tyrannical governments. I mean, we're bringing up Greek stuff at this point, like the Corinthian tyranny. Like that's just too much. And I only have 30 minutes per episode. So it goes like this. We have a problem. We just talk about something. And it usually has something related to the podcast. That one was called the Dashcast. Something involving DoorDash. I don't even understand it at this point, but there's usually a bit that we follow, some funny context, a hook to grab your attention. The hook is supposed to get like the little ADHD minds from like those little 7-year-olds and 9-year-olds who like cannot pay attention unless it says like Minecraft or Among Us in it. But once we get the hook in, we can start drawing them in with more information, unknowns, problem solving, context, things like in questions that maybe people never had the access to ever ask before. From those questions, we can then start piecing together problems, things that people can look around and see that needs to be changed. But we also try to bring up as many perspectives as we can. I'm going like way past my pitch. Let me wrap it up. After that, we then start talking to the audience, all of us, regardless of whether I'm agreeing with the people in the room or not. We can start agreeing on things, truisms. It's a interlocutor argument. We are not debating. We are not and against opposing viewpoints. We are just trying to find the truth. From those truths, we can then start talking to the audience to say, more or less, vote. Do your job as a democracy. There are things we can do, and it's actually surprisingly a lot. Just go do these things. Some people need to be educated, and it's really on us, like the quote unquote the knowledge, the elite, those who know, to pass it on. Thank you for listening.
Questions for KJ? KJ, could you talk a little bit about how you plan on taking this very engaging content? You talk about the hook in the beginning and then bringing in this more dense information, drawing people to that podcast from the beginning. I know you have looked a lot at TikTok and other media channels where this hook would play a very big role in getting people over to the podcast to consume the information. So maybe elaborate a little more on that.
So I was part, this is going to be weird. This is kind of part of the hook and everything, but just bear with me. I was part of a psychology study about ESS, electronic screen syndrome. And what we found is neurobiologically, the more your brain is being shocked by constant light stimulation, which is not natural. These screens are not natural for the human eye, and they're basically getting coked out on dopamine receptors. And it actually shrinks the amygdala over time, and it worsens cognitive and motor functions later in life. Because of this, I'm one of the last generations, 2003, to have lived a portion of my life not on a screen. I didn't get it till I was like 15. And it actually makes me feel like I am different from other people younger than me who did not have that chance. By the time they're 5-year-old, boom, they got a phone or an iPad. You know those iPad kids at like Red Lobster and Olive Garden, like you cannot say I'm lying. I have to break through that barrier. TikTok is about ADHD. It's about stimuli. It's about multiple avenues of stimuli. It is psychology. It is marketing, and it's a little bit of manipulation. However, someone's got to speak to the kids. I've noticed from TikTok, YouTube algorithm trends, I'm just a nerd for that stuff. Like I'm already on YouTube. I'm already on Instagram. I might as well learn about this algorithm that is like forcing me to be into certain cognitive booby traps and like echo chambers. Like, what is this thing that is forcing me to see some things and not other things? I care about perspectives. I wish to hear them all. So I do get, so I might as well study about it. And from that, I've tried to implement that into my marketing acts. I'm sorry for the answer, but I swear I'm getting there. My marketing strategy is as follows. TikTok is going to be a hook and a question in the same way I've seen it on a lot of channels for Joe Rogan podcast, the Logan Paul podcast. I know they're crazy and it's all garbage, but the hook is good and it gets your attention mostly through rage. I'm not going to use rage. A little dumb to be like rageful and like defensive, and you're about to go on a politics podcast. You're not going to learn anything. You're just going to yap and justify and use confirmation bias. I'm going to use a different hook. Just weird, funny, comic. Just something that's like, I wonder what he's talking about. Like Vsauce, Michael here. Like, just have a good personality and just sell it.
KJ, I have a question kind of following on what you just said about it. It relates to discoverability. So you're clearly thinking about how you're going to pull people in, your hooks, all of those things, but your podcast also has a bit of a complicated name to like type in and search for. And so I wonder if you've given thought to that, like how you're going to make sure people ultimately go from TikTok or Instagram or YouTube back to your podcast, or what, how you're going to incorporate discoverability and making sure people actually get to your content.
That is a great question, one that I've put a lot of thought about. And it's actually the same reason why my name is the first thing you see when you type KABOD. There are two things that says KABOD. A French video game that's like an MMORPG that I will never play, not with my name on it. Change the name. That's me, not them. And then there's me. You will see a picture of me as like a 5-year-old on like on the Google Images for some reason. Like, I don't know why it's there. I also just kind of don't care. Like, put it on my LinkedIn. That's the same thing about Afakasi. AFA, KSI, that's so weird. But that's such a unique combinations of letters. Putting that into the algorithm, that will be the first thing that will be seen. Afakasi. Maybe you will see in a Samoan dictionary in the Google like search index. That might be the first thing, but you will see Afakasi podcast right below it. Just 100 people look at it. Boom, I'm already up there. It's just, I know what the niche is. Either play into the game and maybe you'll make it and maybe you won't, or just do something no one else has ever done before. Yikes. What are the rules? I don't know what the rules are. I'm the one doing it. The rules is going to be based on what I do after this. I have a responsibility, and I'm going to try to follow the most right path I can. But in the meantime, I'm really just doing this. So when you ask me what rules I'm going to follow, I don't know. I'll get back to you later.
Excellent.
Love it. Thank you.
We'll go ahead and move on to Sean. KJ, thank you so much for sharing about your podcast. And Sean, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you everybody for being here. This is really exciting. I'm Sean Schrader. I'm from the University of South Florida, wrapping up my master's degree in business administration. Excuse me for having a sweater on. It's 70 degrees down here, so I'm sure y'all probably think that's summertime, but the thin Florida blood makes it a little tricky. But I'm very excited to be wrapping up what I believe is a really good I think structure for a podcast that I'm really excited to be growing as we embark into 2024. While I've done my MBA and prior to that, pursuing a bachelor's degree in business management, I've been really fortunate to be heavily involved in my local community here, doing a lot of different things in local government, and also getting to kind of see the power that comes from taking local steps to create positive change. And I think today we face a plethora of challenges. I mean, if you go on social media, you'll see about all kinds of problems, both domestically and around the world. But I think what is different from previous years versus where we're at today is an inability to really talk about issues of controversy or issues maybe where we share different viewpoints without there being some really hurtful things being said and really personal attacks being made against one another. And I think for our future, that is not healthy. And I think, part of my mindset is that when we take small steps together, we can bring about, real positive change that makes an impact. And so the basis for my podcast has been in being able to converge and bring together different experts in different focus areas to have meaningful, short conversations on some of our most pressing challenges and to really kind of have a full circle view on what an issue is. And particularly, I think this is exciting because you're able to target those who are involved across the country that maybe are updated about what's happening on the news. They're watching what's happening on CNN or Fox News or something like that, but maybe unsure of how to channel that interest or engagement with opportunities to make an impact. And so my first episode was recorded a few weeks ago with a former member of Congress, in which we talked about civil discourse, why it's an issue today, to provide some context, and what we can be doing effectively in our own lives to have civil conversations where we listen to one another, even if we may not agree. I'm really excited as we move into 2024 to be focusing on some other major topics. Tomorrow, thanks to Jenna's help, I'm interviewing the former mayor here in Tampa, Florida. We're going to be talking about transportation and infrastructure, another major topic around the country right now. Why that's important, and why that should be focused on. And then heading into the new year, I'm actually very excited to be working with a former correspondent for CNN at the White House, who will kind of provide an overview of disinformation and why that's such a big challenge right now, and how that's probably going to be an even bigger challenge in 2024, and steps we could be taking to avoid it. So as a whole, I think that this podcast will serve some value. It's called a scoop of inspiration, to provide meaningful conversations on really big topics delivered in a pint-sized format. As a side note, I'm a big fan of ice cream, and so I thought, well, maybe a cool hook to this could be that while we're interviewing the guests, we could, personalize a little bit through eating some ice cream. But Jenna reminded me and Brandon that it may be a little hard to hear everybody if we're chewing on ice cream while we're interviewing everybody. So we've switched a little bit. So at the end of each episode, we get to ask the guest what their favorite flavor is, and everybody's got favorite flavor of ice cream. So I'm excited. I think it's a great opportunity, and I'm excited to learn some more about my own viewpoints through having these conversations.
Questions for Sean?
Sean, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream?
I like peppermint. I know that's a little controversial, but I think it's good. It's perfect right now,
Jesse?
Hi, Sean. You mentioned about, it's just getting people to channel what they see on the news and, just other outlets of information and, getting them to channel that to everyday actions that they can take. So it sounds sort of like a call to action to me. So what are some topics that you plan to cover in your podcast?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It's, you hear these topics, maybe they're frustrating, maybe it's concerning. I think it brings about a lot of emotions. So we have one we've done on civil discourse. So we're going to be focusing on infrastructure. We're going to be tackling misinformation. Heading into the new year, I think it would be important to focus on the environment is a major topic as well in terms of sustainability and sustainable practices. And then the other, really important, focus point I want to have is on this divide in education going on right now. I think you see more and more, maybe some people favor that traditional four-year degree mindset with others, that want a trade or technical skill. So those are kind of the big topics. Hopefully, if it's something you see on the news being talked about, we'll be able to incorporate it at some point with a guest.
Sounds amazing. Looking forward to listening to it.
Al?
Yeah, Sean, I'm curious. How do you think about, or how do you feel, what has brought us to such a degree of a lack of civil discourse in the country today? in so many ways, where we stereotype people, label them, demean them, write them off if they have a view opposite of what we think. And we can't even speak with these people because they're so different. What got us to this point?
Yeah, you're right. It's very disappointing, especially when it's not a, well, you have a different viewpoint than me. It's no, I'm right and you're wrong, and there's no way to overcome that. For me, I mean, I'm no expert, but I think, talking with students and just seeing interactions in my own life, I think that, when we had that shift during the pandemic to, a lot of virtual conversations, it brought about great innovations like this with Zoom that we can have, which is great. But I think at the same time, then you have the rise of social media platforms, where I think that tone and things like that are misinterpreted. And I think some of the time too, you have those that are able to hide behind a virtual background, and be able to disagree with others and make it very personal. And I think that's part of the issue then when there's not that face-to-face element, which is unfortunate. I think things like Zoom are great, but I think when you're on, let's say, X or Twitter or Facebook or things like that, where it's strictly texting or typing back and forth, I think it makes it a lot easier to really hurl insults and just not have a good communication style.
Jenna?
Yeah, Sean, this is maybe not so much of a question as a suggestion for another topic you can cover in your show. Given your business degree you're pursuing and your experience in the business world, you may be aware that there is a movement out there to get business more involved in civic engagement work in efforts to strengthen our democracy. Some of it is very structural, like should companies give people off on election day, or not make people use vacation time to go vote, or give people 2 days off a year to pursue civic engagement projects in their community, those kinds of things. Some of it is more theoretical. How can business leaders take a stand against behavior that is undemocratic and these kinds of things? So there are two organizations I would recommend that you look into. One is called Business for America, and the other is the Leadership Now project. And we could certainly follow up after this call if you want more information. But I think that might be a topic that you can bring a unique perspective to, given some of your education and your background.
No, thank you. That's wonderful. I think there's definitely something to be said for that corporate social responsibility aspect. I think a lot of people get very frustrated when you have challenges and maybe the government, through processes and things like that doesn't move fast enough. And like you said, on the business side of it, you can move faster with some things if you're trying to implement change within your own organization.
All right. Thank you, Sean. Jenna, want to take us home?
Yeah. So I don't know about all of you, but I'm excited to hear these podcasts when they come out. And I'll also say that, working with the fellows, in addition to Brandon and I and all of the guests that we had teaching them things, they also have taught us quite a bit, from a different perspective that we don't always get to hear. Some of the more kind of nuances of how social media and algorithms are working these days, some of the things KJ was talking about. So it really is and has been a two-way learning process here. So we're very thankful to all the fellows for sharing their insights with us. And, I always come away feeling a lot more hopeful about what's to come. I don't think anyone denies that the next year is going to be a tough one for democracy, both in the U.S. and around the world. But it is always refreshing and hopeful to hear these perspectives coming from students, and the fact that there are so many young folks out there working on and ready to tackle the challenges that democracy faces. So for those watching this later, you can check out our network-wide podcast feed and subscribe to the Democracy Group newsletter to be the first to know when the episodes from our fellows drop starting in January. I believe everybody on this call is already subscribed, but if you're not, you can head to democracygroup.org to subscribe to both our newsletter and our network-wide podcast feed. You can also go into whatever podcast app you use and search for the Democracy Group. If you happen to do that now, we're in the middle of our Best of 2023 series. So you can hear all the best episodes from the shows in our network, episodes handpicked by our hosts and producers, and then be ready to get the episodes from our fellows after the new year. And the last thing, we are going to run another fellowship cohort early in the new year. The application will be available starting January 16th and will be due February 12th of 2024. So anybody on the call tonight or anyone watching this later, head to democracygroup.org/fellowship and get all of those details. We would appreciate any help you can provide in spreading the word and helping us recruit another stellar cohort of fellows like the one that we had this fall. And with that, we will close it up. Thank you, Brandon, for putting this together. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Hope you enjoy the rest of your evening and have a great holiday season.